Hi my friends, and welcome back to the February reading wrap-up video. I have 6 books that I want to talk about and I have a lot to say, so I say we start right away. I hope you enjoy. The first book I want to talk about is Atomic Habits by James Clear. This is actually not a fiction book, it is non-fiction, and I was listening to it as an audiobook and I enjoyed that a lot. It is basically about habits and how minor habits or small habits can over time lead to atomic changes or atomic success. And the book is talking about these habits, how they are formed, what you can do wrong, what you can do right to make a habit stick, what you can do to avoid bad habits and to stick to good ones. And I thought the book was very good. I thought that not everything was mind-blowing or something new, but it was a nice little summary, and I did take away a few things that I'm definitely going to do going forward. The book also has a few backstories, or it goes into the brain, how everything works in here when it comes to habits, and I found those parts really interesting. And I just want to talk about one fact that I read in this book that I thought was really interesting. It's not really related to the main argument or the main points, but it just, I don't know, it struck me as super interesting. So the author in one chapter is talking about the basic human trait of being an extrovert or an introvert. And he says that basically you are born an extrovert or an introvert. And he can prove that because there was some research done with infants in the newborn ward in hospitals. Researchers created a loud sound, loud noises, and there were certain babies that would turn toward the sound and then other babies that would turn away from it, that saw it as a disturbance. And so the researchers would follow these children later on in their lives as adults and catch up with them. And the babies that turned toward the sound turned out to be extroverts, and the babies that turned away were introverts. I don't know, I thought that was really cool. And yeah, all in all, I thought it was a good book. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. And anybody who wants to create new habits, this is for you. Next up is Malibu Rising by Jenkins Reid. I feel like I've shown this book into the camera already a bunch of times, but today I want to go into the details and give you a more detailed review. So it's historical fiction. It takes place in the 70s and 80s in Malibu, California, right around that time where Malibu was turning from being a basic part of the coastline to basically being the place to be. And in this book, we follow the Riva family. That is Nina Riva and her siblings. She has 2 brothers and 1 sister. And they are all the kids of a very famous singer who was not around during their childhood, who abandoned them. So they've grown up with always having his fame and name over their heads, but never actually having had a dad. So all the Rivas also turned out somewhat famous though. So Nina, for example, is a model. Her brother is a very successful surfer. He's competing in world competitions. And the other brother is a photographer, and the youngest sister is also a surfer. And so you can tell surfing is a big part of this novel. So if you're into surfing, I can highly recommend it to you. But the main story is not about surfing. It is about a certain party that the Rivas throw every year at the end of summer. And it's basically the place to be. It's the party to be at. Everybody goes there, every celebrity, everybody who, the papers talk about at this time. And there's always something happening, some drama. This year, we are basically right before this year's party starts, and it's very different from other years because the Rivas, the 4 siblings, have all secrets this year that they are hiding from one another, that they don't want to come out. And you can tell, or you can guess at this party, they're gonna come out and drama is starting to happen. So basically the book, we have a lot of build up in the beginning, and then I think the party starts somewhere in the last third or after that first half of the book, and that's then when all the build up, all the tension is released and one dramatic thing after another happens. So I loved reading about the party. I just loved the idea of following a party and all these people's secrets coming out. I really enjoyed it. If you ask me, the party could have been a bigger part of the book. I liked the build up and the backstory of all the characters, but to me the fun was the party. So for me, it could have been almost the entire book. I also really like that Taylor Jenkins Reid has this habit of linking her books. So we had characters appear in this book from The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Also, Carrie Soto is back, made an appearance. So that I really like because it makes me want to read the next book. So all in all, I think, yeah, it was a good book. I can recommend it to anybody who likes to read about the famous and wealthy in the 70s and 80s in California, the actors and stars that lived at the time. Anybody who likes surfing, and if you like Taylor Jenkins Reid, definitely pick this one up. For me, it was great. The only negative is that although I really felt with the characters, I wasn't as invested in them. I'm not sure why. So I want to give it 3.5 out of 5 stars because I gave Evelyn Hugo 4 stars. So this was not as strong for me, but all in all, a recommendation. Now, the next book. I have no idea how I'm going to say this. I'm dreading talking about this, but here we go. Let's just get it over with. It is Credence by Penelope Douglas. And at this point, I want to say, welcome to my rant, welcome to my negative rant of the day. If you don't want to hear too much criticism or negativity, I suggest you skip to the next book. If you stick around, I say, I apologize for everything I'm going to say next, but yeah, I don't know. This book just left me speechless and not in a good way. And I don't know. Let me just start with telling you how I came about to have this book on my bookshelf. So in last summer, I went to a library book sale in Maine, and the books, it was a very cute library. The books were all on the bookshelf and it wasn't really sorted by genre or anything. And all the books were $1 or $2. So I went crazy and I didn't really look too much at these books, which, yeah, that is my lesson to learn from this. Really inform yourself of the genre that a certain book is before buying it. But anyways, I pulled out Credence and I thought at the time, okay, the cover looks really cute and the story behind here also sounds interesting. From reading this, I had no idea what kind of book this is, so that's why I'm warning you now. But yeah, let me tell you what it is about. So it is about Tirnanda Haas. She is a 17-year-old girl of very wealthy, successful parents. But her life wasn't easy because her parents basically were never there for her. They had no interest in her and, yeah, weren't really parents. They ignored her most of her life. And so she never had a family, really. At the beginning of the story, her parents commit suicide. And basically Tirnan is left alone. She's now an orphan. And she is not of age yet, so she's being sent to her only living relative, which is an uncle who lives in Colorado with his 2 sons. He's not her uncle by blood. He used to be the stepbrother of her father, but she has never heard of this person up until her parents died. So she's going there now to this uncle in Colorado and for the first time has a family. But yeah, it's also a romance novel, so we have a romance story. And yeah, here's my first problem. So I would not say that this book is a romance book. I think it is erotica. I would compare it to maybe Shades of Grey or something like that. I never really read those, but that's what I would think. So to me, the romance part really was a backstory. It was more about all the intimate scenes. There were so many that at some point I was really bored because every single chapter was an intimate scene. And I mean, I'm not against it. I realize romance novels have them, but at this frequency, and I don't know, it didn't give me anything. It made it seem like not very special at that point. It felt like the author just wanted to shock or the reader, or yeah, was basically like writing erotica. And so I got up to this point, I just couldn't bring myself to finish it. So I read up to here and there were a lot of points in time where I had to put the book down because I thought, no, I cannot keep reading it. And then I thought, okay, let me give it one more chance. And nope, it didn't happen. So I read up to this point, a little bit more than half. And then I just skimmed through it. I think in like 20 minutes, I skimmed through the rest of this just to see if anything changes towards the end. Nope, it stays the way it was up to that point. The reason why I read this far to begin with is because in the beginning I thought the characters were very interesting. I thought Tiernan had an interesting backstory and everything, but when she gets to Colorado, everything just goes downhill. And let me tell you, all the characters in this book should probably be in therapy, should not be around each other because they're not good for each other. And yeah, I mean, they were all very messed up and the interactions were very odd. The relationships Tiernan has with her dad and her brothers are very odd. I mean, I could live with all that, but then there was also the point where there's a lot of abuse in this book. Tiernan gets physically and mentally abused, in my opinion, and the author is romanticizing this. I mean, I was shocked. She's literally physically being abused, she's spat on, she is mentally being abused, and in the end ends up with her lover who did all this to her. Yeah, so in the end there's a happy ending and she ends up with someone who abused her for the majority of this book. I mean, I could not believe it. I don't know what I read here. I'm so sorry for what I'm saying right now, for how I sound, but Credence was not for me. If it had been in a different section or labeled in a different way, I would have never picked it up. But yeah, it ended up on my bookshelf and now I was stuck with it. I'm happy that I have finished this. It is definitely not going to stay with me. And yeah, I think this concludes my rant. As I said, I am really sorry. I had no idea what I was getting into here. Anyways, moving on. Let's put this behind us and move on to the next book. In February, I also read Save the Cat Writes a Novel by Jessica Brody. It is a nonfiction book about writing, and I don't want to talk too much about it because it's really special interest, but if you're a writer, if you like to write novels, screenplays, anything like that, I highly recommend this book. If you read this one, you don't need anything else. In my opinion, it perfectly summarizes how to create a plot, how to create great characters. And so if you're interested in that, pick it up. It helped me a lot. I just finished plotting a new writing project and I use this book to help me. And so I'll see how it is once I start writing, but I have a very good feeling about it. So highly recommend it. I would say 4 out of 5 stars. Yeah. So just briefly wanted to show that. And then next up, I wanted to show you Dragonflight by Anne McCaffrey. It is fantasy, high fantasy, science fiction, you could say, and it's the sort of novel that I don't really read much. This was recommended to me by a friend, and so I picked it up. It took me a long time, and I must say I was pleasantly surprised. I did not expect to like the story as much, but let me tell you what it's about first. So in this book, we are in a completely different world from ours. It's called Pern, and Pern is a place where there's dragons and yeah, it reminded me a little bit of the setting in Game of Thrones. Pern is a little different though, because every 200 years, 400 years, another planet passes by Pern and there's threats on this planet. It's a substance that rains down onto the earth or onto this planet, Pern, and it destroys everything that is organic matter. So it's a danger that comes around every 200, 400 years, something like that. And so it's such a long time span between the threats that the people of Pern forget about it. And the Dragonriders are the only weapon that Pern has against these threats. They can destroy them, but just as the people forget about the threat of the threats, wow, what a sentence, they also forget of the importance and meaning of dragons. So Dragonriders are, at the beginning of this book, people that are not very highly valued, people that, yeah, are questioned, why are you even here? We don't really need you. So it's not an ideal situation for the world and for dragons. And it's in this situation that Lessa, the main character, becomes a dragon rider. She becomes the dragon queen. So she's now part of this community that is not valued, and she knows of the danger that the other planet poses with its threats. And so yeah, we basically see how the Dragonriders overcome adversaries and how they can finally prove that the threats are real. I mean, as you can hear, the story is really high fantasy, and as I said, it reminded me a little of Game of Thrones, and I was not sure how I would handle it because I'm not used to getting used to a whole new world. I don't really read much fantasy, but surprisingly, it was no problem for me. I thought it was a really cool book. I enjoyed it. I broadened my horizon. I can really see why people like it. I was amazed with the author's imagination. I mean, I can see her greatness. I can see why she's a great writer. And I'm not sure if I am going to pick up the next books in the series, because this is really just the start, but I enjoyed it a lot. I give it 3 out of 5 stars. And yeah, I'm just happy that I finally read this, you could say, classic of fantasy. So thank you again for recommending it to me. The last book that I want to talk about is one that I'm really happy about. It's one of those books that have been sitting in my bookshelf for a long time, and I never had any interest in picking it up. And so I'm very happy that my February challenge forced me to, because it was such a good surprise. I'm talking about The Elegance of the Hedgehog by Muriel Barbery. And when I say it was such a great surprise, it's because my expectations were really low. I don't know, the cover, the backstory, what I read here on the back, it did not resonate with me, but the story really did. And so this really showed me that the cover and the summary is not always everything. In this story, we follow 2 inhabitants of a very fancy, wealthy apartment building in Paris. One of them is 12-year-old Paloma. She is the daughter of French politicians. I think her father is a politician, and so they're very wealthy. But Paloma, despite all the wealth and everything they have, is not a happy person. She's very smart, and she starts thinking about the meaning of life, the meaning of death, and doesn't really see what the meaning of all this fuss is about. So she makes the decision that on her birthday, she's going to take her own life and set the apartment building on fire. I know it sounds harsh, but believe me when I say it is not a sad story. Her story is not that sad. She is very rational and just is very curious and discovers the world and its beauties and the parts that are not so beautiful. But yeah, that is Paloma's story. We also have Renee, and she works at this building. She is not living, well, she is living there, but she's the concierge. So she's different from all the other people there. She doesn't really interact much with them, but Renee is also very intelligent. And nobody thinks that about her. She's very unassuming. She doesn't want anybody to know that in her free time she reads philosophy and loves art and museums. You know, she wants everybody to think she's just this little concierge that don't mind about her, basically. And yeah, at some point the paths of these 2 people cross, and basically Renee helps Paloma see the meaning of life. So I really loved this book, and although it is a coherent story, I felt like every chapter was more like an essay about philosophy, the meaning of life, beauty, art, language. It's about grammar. It's about a lot about Japanese culture too, the French culture, politics. So, you know, the topics aren't easy, and the language isn't easy either. So it's the kind of book you really, you have to pay attention to. You sit there with a marker and a pen and you read it, and you have to reflect about it. So it took me a while to read, but I pulled so much out of it. There were certain chapters when I finished them, I had to put the book to the side and I really thought about what I just read. And so it was a very interactive book for me. It has a lot of humor too. So despite the story sounding a little sad, it's very humorous. I laughed a bunch of time. I got the humor. It was right up my alley. And so, I don't know, for me it just really had everything. Thoughtfulness, it was sad at one point, it was funny, it had everything. However, I would not recommend this book to everybody, I must say. I think it's tough to say, but if you enjoy philosophical essays and philosophical ideas and discussing them, I think this book is for you. If you enjoy more difficult texts and really looking for meaning in between the words, this book is for you. If you want just an easy read to like entertain, I'm not sure if this is what you're looking for. So all in all, for me, it was amazing. I was so pleasantly surprised. I give it 4 out of 5 stars, and it was my favorite book out of the 6 that I read this month. All right, everybody, we have arrived at the end of my video. I hope that you enjoyed. I hope that you forgive me for my rant. I know it was a big part of the video, but this is how it is. I can say that I'm very excited about my March. I have amazing books on my March TBR, and I cannot wait to talk about next month's books already. But yeah, for now, I just wish you guys a great week, all the best. Stay safe, stay healthy, and bye bye.